when you see these works, there's really only one thing you can do: lift your head and stare. Because for a few seconds, awe and wonder won't let you do anything else. The first astonishing feature that captivates any viewer at first glance is the height of the statue of David, around 5 meters tall. But after the initial amazement, trance, and perhaps a brief discussion about the statue's small genitalia, the viewer begins to notice that the proportions of the statue seem somewhat irregular. Still, they can't take their eyes off it. To portray a mythic hero, Michelangelo sculpted very slender legs and thighs, while the head, neck, and hands appear larger and heavier. But this imbalance in proportions was intentional. Michelangelo had been commissioned to create the statue for placement on the roofline of Florence Cathedral alongside other prophets. So the statue was meant to be viewed from street level. Michelangelo's solution for making the statue look correct from that perspective was to enlarge the upper body parts, following classical methods of perspective correction, so everything would appear balanced when seen from below. But after the unveiling of the statue and the realization of its heavy weight, which would have certainly caused the roof of the cathedral to collapse, it was moved to the main square of Florence. The decision to move it was made by a 30-member council, which included Leonardo da Vinci and Sandro Botticelli. The story of the statue's move from Michelangelo's workshop to the town square is quite an interesting one, and it just so happens that a local pharmacist named Luca Landussi recorded this significant event in his diary. This pharmacist, who became a historian through his diary entries, later became one of the most important sources of Italian history. So much so that even a street in Florence is named after him. If you happen to pass by this street, you'll see that Landussi's name is remembered for his daily written accounts. This pharmacist wrote that it was on the night of May 14th, 1504, when this giant statue left Michelangelo's workshop. They even had to destroy the arch of the workshop because the archway was too low for the statue to pass through. 40 strong men were pushing the large wooden cart, in which the statue of David was securely wrapped and held together with ropes. Slowly but surely, the giant statue made its way through the city. Finally, on June 8, 1504, it reached Signoria Square and was placed next to the entrance of the Vecchio Palace, where the previous bronze statue by Donatello, Judith, and Holofernes had stood. This statue remained in Signoria Square until 1873, but due to some damage caused by weather conditions, it was moved to its current location. In 1910, a replica was placed at the original spot of the statue of David. The original still stands in its new location. What feeling does this statue still convey? A statue that Giorgio Vasari, the first art historian, wrote about like this: anyone who has seen Michelangelo's David needs to see no other statue, living or dead. This statue depicts the young David, the future king of Israel. He holds a small sling on his left shoulder, which he is about to use to strike the giant Goliath, the Philistine. The stone will ultimately hit Goliath in the center of his forehead, causing him to fall to the ground, and David will sever his head to end the battle. Despite this heroic narrative, Michelangelo gave David a completely thoughtful expression. It seems that David's deep gaze and the way his right hand hangs by his side, alongside his powerful yet light posture, emphasize not just his physical strength, but his thoughtful, introspective nature. What we are looking at is David in a moment of contemplation. Most critics and art historians have concluded that Michelangelo's statue of David depicts him before his battle with Goliath. His furrowed brow, fierce gaze, and slightly disdainful expression, along with the veins bulging in his right arm, present a man who is calmly and thoughtfully assessing his great enemy before the storm. Despite all of this grandeur, Michelangelo's David is alone. He appears somewhat companionless and even somewhat alien. But this ambiguity in his character is part of the statue's meaning because it truly represents a noble figure whose aim is not to show a moment of combat, rage, or violence, but rather to showcase the psychological balance of a human being. Celebrating David as a warrior is not difficult, but David as a noble, worthy, yet vulnerable and thoughtful figure presents a much more complex perspective. And artworks that target such complexity tend to be more enduring through time. Like Michelangelo's statue of David. The statue also provided a young Michelangelo the opportunity to showcase his unprecedented skills as a sculptor. At the time of this commission, he was a 26-year-old who had recently returned to Florence from Rome after working there for some time. It is said that the statue has been carved from a single block of marble from Carrara, a port city in the northwest of Italy, since 1501. This enormous block of marble had been rejected or abandoned by at least 2 other artists before Michelangelo took it on. The marble block remained untouched for more than a quarter of a century until Michelangelo arrived. Another sculptor from Florence, Agostino di Duccio, was initially assigned the task. Beginning in 1464, 40 years before Michelangelo, Duccio struggled with the block, defining the legs and torso. 10 years later, another sculptor named Antonio Rossellino was tasked with continuing Duccio's work, which seemed to have been abandoned. However, Rossellino didn't last long either, and the unfinished statue remained untouched for another 26 years. The block that Michelangelo inherited was in poor condition. In September 1501, church authorities decided to hire the 26-year-old artist to continue the project after his previous success carving Pietà, the dead body of Christ lying on his mother's lap, a work that had already been repeated in art history and had brought him fame. But this time, how did this young artist showcase his skills? To answer this question, we need to familiarize ourselves with a term coined during the Renaissance, contrapposto, which means counterpose, or against each other. But what are the features of this term? To answer this, let's first think about how a person appears when standing upright. In Egyptian sculpture, the answer to this question emphasized the natural symmetry of the human body. Egyptian statues were displayed with level shoulders, symmetrical arms, and hips, as if they were soldiers or foot soldiers always in service without any change. This symmetry characteristic was passed on to early Greek sculptors. However, one of the most interesting aspects of the development of sculpture in ancient Greece was the beginning of a new type of standing posture. This posture moved away from Egyptian symmetry and presented a new form that made the statue appear to be in motion, as if an event was occurring in a fraction of a second. This delicate yet fundamental invention, which after the Renaissance came to be known as contrapposto, has its roots in ancient Greece. It marks a turning point in the naturalistic representation of the human body. In this new technique, the human weight is no longer evenly distributed on both legs. Because there is no symmetry, the weight of the body shifts onto one leg, while the other leg appears relaxed and lighter. This intentional asymmetry in the legs triggers movement in the rest of the body. The hips tilt, causing the upper body to compress on one side and open on the other. This way, the stillness and symmetry gives way to a more flexible state. In this statue, one arm is raised while the other hand hangs loosely by the side. The neck is turned, and the left leg is completely relaxed, with more weight placed on the right leg. Overall, the arrangement of the limbs is asymmetrical yet harmonious, creating a soft S shape in the body that evokes a sense of calm thought based on muscular strength. Do you see what's happening here? Usually we perceive an emotional response from a work of art. It has an effect on us, and we don't always understand exactly why this happens. When we discover the reason for this in the artwork itself, we enjoy it even more and realize the value of that piece of art. But I digress. During the Italian Renaissance, this classical gesture was explicitly revived. The talent and abilities of Italian sculptors were inspired by Roman sculptures, which were being discovered throughout Italy at that time, and they revived and expanded this method. Michelangelo's David is probably the most famous sculpture that uses contrapposto, done with incredible finesse, precision, and beauty, which captivates every viewer. Now, let's become familiar with the most famous works created or depicted using the contrapposto rule. Number 1 goes to Michelangelo's David. Number 2 is for the Spearman sculpture. Although this is a replica from the 1st century AD, the original is a bronze statue from the 4th century BC, 500 years earlier, and its spear is also missing. Number 3 refers to Hermes and the infant Dionysus, made in the 4th century BC. Number 4 is again David, but this time by the famous Donatello. The 5th is The Birth of Venus, the masterpiece by Sandro Botticelli. The 6th is The Three Graces, a famous work by Antonio Canova. Lastly, Portrait of Madame X by John Singer Sargent from 1884. This is the end of the video, and please share your thoughts about this episode and overall about the Dell'Arte series. Let us know which episode you liked the most or what topics you'd like us to discuss. And please make sure to subscribe. In each episode of Dell'Arte, we explore an artistic phenomenon. This episode attempts to explain an important and thought-provoking aspect of the art world. So stay tuned with us.